Are you having trouble trying to find tutorials that show you how to implement camera controls for your gamepad or any other controller? Well, here you are, because I did as well, and I could not find anything, and I wanted to make this video to make it easier for others to find it. So, if I go ahead and press play, and I test out my controller, as you can see right here, on my right joystick, I have both vertical movement and horizontal rotations as well. And I also have clamps to keep me from going past my player vertically and yeah, just vertically. And we also have code from a different tutorial that I will shout out later to where whatever direction my camera is facing, that also influences what is considered forward for my player. So now I'm only pressing up on my on my left joystick for movement in these examples right here. Press up, change my camera, press up, change my camera, press up. So I will show you how to implement this camera rotation as well as how to get the code to match with the other person's tutorial. So, of course, the other person's tutorial is Colin. His YouTube channel BourneCG he makes a playlist of making a 3D platformer in Godot from scratch, and I highly recommend this. And so a lot of his code will be in my script, and I will also modify it. The original post that I found that led me to help figure this out in the first place is right here, but I still had some troubles with it. And then this is my forum post right here. As you can see, I had some weird camera issues like this. Now, with all that being said, let's get into my code, into how I eventually figured it out with the help of others. So, first off, to set up the camera, we need two separate, I guess, children for rotation. So you have the camera pivot, which is just a simple node 3D, and then a camera controller, which is a spring arm 3D, and then the camera 3D, which is a child of the camera controller, and then again, the camera controller is a child of the camera pivot. Now, as you might notice, because the camera is a child of the player, you'd say, oh, well, won't the rotation and movements affect the player? Well, that's why we turn on, affect the camera specifically. Well, that's why we turn on the top level for the camera pivot, so that the rotations of the player and the movements of the player do not directly affect the camera pivot itself. So now, to go into the code, I've accessed them as unique names right here, as you can see. So camera pivot, again, is the node 3D. Camera controller is the spring arm 3D. And right here in function physics process, I have a variable called axis vector that is just input.getVector. And then I have my inputs from my right joystick, as you can see right here. My right joystick for the inputs. And then getVector is specifically a vector2 node, so it is a 2D vector, so keep that in mind. And then right underneath that, I have an if statement. This is just checking to see if the length of our axis vector value is greater than 0.2. This is just to help prevent a lot of minor stick drift with controllers. Now right here, as you can see, the camera pivot and the camera controller, I am rotating them separately because the problem with one of the problems, as you can see with this, and like some other problems I had, was I only had, like, let's say for example, I only had the camera controller. I did not have the camera pivot. If I tried to rotate the camera controller on X and Y, it would cause some weird gimbal lock rotation issues. So that's why we have two separate points to rotate the camera around. So the camera pivot, I'm specifically rotating on the Y-axis. Of course, got to convert it from degrees to radians. Then I'm taking the x value of my axis vector because, as I mentioned earlier, the get vector is a 2D vector. It returns a 2D vector, so that means that the horizontal value from this would be the x value. So that's why I put it here. And of course, to rotate horizontally in 3D space would be to do it on the y-axis. And then this float right here, this like multiplying the axis vector value, this is just, think of it as like a sensitivity multiplier. If you want to decrease your camera speed or increase it, you would of course decrease or increase this number in return. Now here for the camera controller, I have rotated on the x-axis, and of course, as I said, because this is a 2D vector, the vertical value on a 2D vector is y, and rotation for an x in 3D space is vertical. So that's why we use the y-axis. And of course, these negatives are just to invert the values. You could have these or not have these depending on your own personal preference. Again, multiplying it by the sensitivity multiplier. Now right here is the last part. We are simply clamping the rotation of your camera controller. So of course it's just a simple clamp, take its current position of rotation, and then degrees to radians, the top and bottom parts of your clamp. So overall, this is very simple. Now to modify some of the code from Colin's tutorial, this is what I did. So first right here, I have my direction variable. I just changed this to be my camera pivot. And then right here, this is the code to have your characters forward be relative to the position of the camera. And right here, I just changed it to be camera pivot. And then, as I mentioned earlier, because we have our camera pivot on the top level and it's not being directly affected by the player, we still want the camera to follow the player around. So Colin did have this lerp here, and I just changed it to be referencing my camera pivot. So other than that, there's a very large headache, and I hope this video helped a lot of people find a quick and easy resource. And if you want to look into it further and maybe see some other things of like why my problem was happening, here's the original post I found that gave me like the initial breadcrumbs of how to implement camera support for controller. And then I will post my forum post in the description with Gert Kino helping me a lot. And then, of course, I will also link Colin's playlist as well. I hope this helped because I sure wish I had this.